It was 2019. I lived in a house with two other girls. We were all in our early 20s. The house backed into a park. It was more like an open lot that was accessible through a main road. There wasn't any playground or barbecue area there, just long thick grass and trees. The backyard fence was only about waist high, and there was a tree on the right-hand side, obstructing about half of the view over the fence into the park. One night after I showered and got into my underwear and a baggy shirt, because it was summer, I hear the dog in the backyard going absolutely mad. My housemate was not home at the time, and the dog belonged to her. I fly out of the back door and see that he's baring his teeth and snarling toward the fence. He had caught and killed possums before, so I was concerned that there was one by the tree. I grabbed him by the collar to get him back inside and away from the possum. As I did, I got a shiver and a sense that something wasn't right. He was still going ballistic, and I looked up and saw a figure standing in the dark just on the other side of the fence. It was a man who was about 5'10", and he didn't say anything. I couldn't see his face. I naturally jump and say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't even see you there." The man did not reply. He just stood there in his beanie and jacket, staring at me. I kept the dog in front of me as I backed into the house. Once inside, I locked up everything and closed all the windows, and I called my partner to come over. A few small things happened over the next few months, but nothing that really stood out. There was a popped security screen, and we found some computer parts in the lawn that could have been discarded by kids or something. One night, I get home after having drinks and dinner with some friends. It was late, around 10 p.m. We often left the back door open to let the dog come in and out. We always just kind of assumed that the dog would scare away anyone from breaking in. How naive. When I got into the kitchen, which was next to the back door, I hear the dog barking in the backyard. Again, this has happened many times before, so I ignore it and make myself a drink before going out there and bringing him back inside. I then see a shadow move to my right, inside the fucking house, rounding the corner from the back door into the kitchen. I froze. I then think to myself, what on earth is this man doing? It's summer, and he's in a long coat covering his entire neck to his wrists. And then panic set in. I back myself up to the counter and looked down to see that there was a knife in his hand. It was one of our kitchen knives from the block behind me. So now I'm aware he has already been inside this house. This wasn't a robbery. He had already had the chance to steal anything he wanted. There was a scuffle, and he pulled the rug from under my feet, and I hit my head on the counter. I was knocked unconscious. The last thing I remember is the dog barking from behind him. It turns out our scary dog was too afraid to attack him, but he was still doing his best to scare him away. The police and detectives eventually came, but there wasn't anything that they could do, because technically there was no breaking and entering, since our back door was left wide open. This also meant that it would be difficult to determine what he touched. I also seem to remember that he was wearing gloves, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I did have defensive wounds to my hands and some bruising, but overall I was fine. It could have been a lot worse. Nothing ever came of this. The police suggested that we lock our back door from now on and hope nothing like this would ever happen again. I can't be sure if it was the man I saw by our back fence. Around this time, we had a third housemate. One day she asked me for a cigarette because she was stressed out about something. I told her that I didn't smoke, and then she suggested that it must be our other housemate. Confused, I said, "What are you talking about? Neither of us smoke." Apparently, she had been picking up cigarette butts from outside the front and side doors of our house for her entire stay. She never said anything about it because she decided it was something that bothered her, but clearly not us, so she didn't mind cleaning them up. She would leave very early in the morning for work, before either of us woke up, which is why we never saw them. This is going to be kind of long, so please bear with me. So this happened when I was in high school, and still living with my parents and my younger brother in a house in the suburbs. The area I grew up in was very quiet and safe. We lived in the Midwest, and our town was as Midwest as you can get, which means that everyone knew each other. Even the strangers were very kind and eager to help, with some exceptions, of course. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where every third house had the same exact layout, which means everyone was pretty much living on an equal level. For the most part, everyone got along pretty well, and there was hardly any crime since everyone was coming from a similar financial background. So it would be an understatement to say that it felt very safe where I lived. That was until strange things began to happen. At first, it was small things, pretty inconsequential in the moment, but now when I look back at everything, I always made a connection to the strange events that were going on. It started at the beginning of my junior year of high school. One morning I woke up early to put away my clothes. Because I'm weird about these kind of things, I make sure all my dressers and doors were closed before I left, as I was the last one out of the house, and I happened to have a doctor's appointment on that day. I was the first one back. When I came up to my room, my door wasn't closed all the way, and my closet was completely open. I thought it was weird, but I brushed it off. But this happened more than once. I would sometimes be missing shirts or pants after I told myself that I was just being stupid and probably misplaced them somewhere. Another night, after I had gone to bed, I was woken up by the sound of footsteps coming up the stairs. The fifth step always creaked very loudly, and when I heard that, I instantly sat up. I remember it clearly because I could hear it over my fan. After the footsteps stopped, I checked every room upstairs. All of the bedrooms were on the second floor. All the doors were closed and everyone else was sleeping. All of the doors creak pretty loudly when they're opened in the night, so I would have heard something since I was the only one who slept with their door open. I couldn't see much. Everyone was sound asleep. I stayed awake for a while to try to catch it again, but I eventually fell asleep, figuring that my mind was just playing tricks on me. I asked my family about it casually the next morning, but everyone said they slept through the night. All of these small occurrences accumulated into one of the weirdest experiences I've had to date. It was halfway through the year, and I had driven myself and my brother home from high school. I threw down my bags on the dining room table and laid down on the couch to watch some TV. My brother went downstairs to take the dog out and then play some video games. I could tell by the fact that there were no other cars in the garage that my parents were still at work. So I put the volume on medium so I could hear them when they got back. My parents used to give me a lot of crap for watching TV after school. Everything was fine, and I actually began dozing off when I heard a very distinct thumping sound coming from upstairs. I thought it was just my imagination. I watch a lot of horror films, so I tend to be pretty jumpy sometimes. I went back to my show, but the thumping continued for about 5 minutes. That's when I finally decided that something was off. I muted the TV and listened for a few more minutes. It was a rhythmic thumping, and it was coming from directly upstairs. For a second, I thought it was just my dog, since he sometimes paced up and down the stairs, trying to find somewhere to lay down. So I called out for him, but my brother shouted that he was downstairs with him. So I walked up the stairs to the top and listened. The noise was coming from directly above me. I started to get scared when I realized that the only thing above me was the attic. And furthermore, I realized that it wasn't thumping that I was hearing. It was footsteps, like somebody was wearing boots and pacing around the attic. Even though I was thinking the worst, I told myself to be practical. There are only 2 entrances to the attic: a small panel in the ceiling of my brother's bedroom, and a 3rd-story window. I checked his bedroom, and the panel looked like it hadn't been touched in a very long time. We hadn't even opened it since we moved in, because the previous owners told us it was just insulation and wiring. I then thought about how we were having trouble recently with our satellite dish, and my dad had to call a repairman to come fix it. I opened the front door and went around back, but there wasn't anything on the roof. Not that I could see anyway. It was pretty high up. I then went back inside. My brother was standing in the doorway, asking me what was going on, since he heard the door open. I told him about what I heard and asked him to come check it out with me, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. When we got upstairs, he gets this weird look on his face and then asked, "What is that?" I felt relieved knowing it wasn't just me. I whispered, "It sounds like somebody is walking up there, right?" He nods and points downstairs, suggesting that we say no more and I should follow him down there. The floors are pretty thin in this house, so in case there was somebody up there, we would want to talk about this out of earshot. Once we were downstairs, I tell him about the roof and the possibility of a repairman being up there, although I didn't see a van outside. And my brother shakes his head, saying that the repair people were coming later that week. That's when we decided to call our dad. I explained everything to him. I could tell that he didn't believe us, but was trying to be nice about it. I can't exactly blame him. It was highly improbable for somebody to even want to be in our attic, let alone get up there. He suggested it might have been a bird or a raccoon. We lived near a large patch of woods. I tried explaining to him that no animal could make that kind of thumping sound. If it was a bird, it would have had to have been repeatedly slamming itself into the floor. And even then, that wouldn't explain how the floor was creaking like somebody was shifting their weight. He said just to wait it out and that he would be home soon. The thumping continued for well over 30 minutes. I decided to camp out in my brother's room until it stopped. After about 15 minutes, I had to use the restroom. There's one right next to his room and is still under the attic. As I was washing my hands, I realized that the thumping was a lot louder now and directly above me. It was weird because before, the thumping was loud when I was in my brother's room. It was like the sound had followed me. Sometimes when I get really scared, I get super angry. So I banged twice on the ceiling. I'm a pretty tall girl, so I used my fist. I then shouted, "What the fuck is this?" The steps then completely stopped. I was confused for a second. Then clear as day, there were 2 loud thuds. Like someone stomping their foot twice very loud. I ran out of the bathroom to my brother, who was coming up the stairs. What just happened? The pacing started again, so I quickly explained everything to my brother. He then pulled out his phone and called my dad a second time. As he's trying to explain everything, I can tell that my dad is still not giving in, frustrated and frightened. I take the phone from my brother, put my dad on speaker, and hold the phone up to the attic, then say, "Listen to this." Suddenly, all the noises completely stop. Absolutely no sound whatsoever. After about a minute of silence, I hear my dad say, "What sound?" My brother and I just look at each other and bolt down the stairs. I tell my dad to come home quick and that we would wait downstairs for him. He then said that he was pulling up the driveway, so we opened the door and ran out to him. After my brother and I explained things quickly and nearly out of breath, to my dad's credit, we did sound a bit insane. He follows us upstairs to where the sound was coming from. But now, there was absolutely no sound at all. And even though we beg him several times to go take a look, he laughs and says that we're just overreacting, and there was nothing there. Taking out the panel might cause some damage to the ceiling. We don't know that for sure because we've never tried to look up there, so he was pretty set on not going up there to check things out, unless he hears it himself. Of course, the steps never came back, at least not when we were around or awake. My brother secretly stayed in my room for a couple of days, because he was still freaked out about the whole thing, and we were never able to prove what happened to our parents. When the repair people finally did come, I noticed that instead of using a ladder, they went around to our backyard and climbed up to the roof from our deck. They were also able to walk around pretty freely up there and could easily access the window to our attic, which was around the front of the house. I've always wondered if there was someone secretly living up there and would come down at night without us knowing. But if that was the case, why would they let us know that they were up there that day? It still bothers me that we never checked. My name is Caleb Fletcher. I'm 16 years old, and the story that I'm about to tell is something that I'll never forget. This took place on the 24th of August. School had been going on for about 2 weeks, so to decompress, I decided to see if my friends Griffin and Broly wanted to hop on Fortnite. My mom and sister were out shopping, and my dad was working, so I was pretty bored. It was around 8 p.m. when we finally got online to play. After a few rounds, I could tell that my friends were getting tired of losing, so they logged off after about an hour. I planned on just lying down with my phone before going to bed. That was until I heard my 2 dogs barking outside. It's not that unusual for them to bark, given how people walk on the side of the road outside of our front yard. But I still looked anyway. You can never be too careful these days. I didn't see anyone there, but seconds after I looked out of the window, I heard our garage door opening and then closing. That usually meant my dad was home from work. However, I thought it was odd that I didn't see his van outside, and he had even texted me earlier, letting me know that he would be working late. I decided to walk downstairs into the dining room to get a better look. From there, I could see that the driveway was empty. At first I thought, oh shit, could it be a ghost? For context, someone had died on our property many years ago when there used to be a gas station here. Apparently an old man put too much air into his tire and it exploded. Now, I'm not the type to go investigate strange noises in the night, so I ran back up to my bedroom and texted my family group chat to ask if anybody was home. I told my mom about the garage door. and she told me to turn off all the lights, lock my bedroom door, and stay in there until she got home. So I did just that. About 15 minutes later, I thought I heard the wooden floorboards downstairs creaking, like somebody was trying to sneak around. I didn't have anything to use as a weapon, so I unclipped my microphone's boom arm from my desk and quietly opened my door. I walked onto the upstairs balcony and looked over, trying to see if I could spot anyone hiding or anything suspicious. I then stupidly called out, "Is anyone there?" As if somebody was actually going to answer me. For a second, I thought I was just being paranoid about this whole thing, until I saw the silhouette of someone standing beneath the balcony. I panicked and ran to the closest room, which happened to be the small bathroom beside my room. The intruder must have known that I saw him, because I heard loud footsteps coming up our stairs as I locked myself inside. I was cursing under my breath that I had accidentally left my phone in my bedroom. After hearing nothing for several minutes, I finally built up enough courage and bolted out of the bathroom into my bedroom, locking the door as soon as I got in. My sister's room was right across from mine, and I noticed that her door was open. So I figured that's where the intruder must have gone. After locking myself in my bedroom, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. But just before I hit the call button, I noticed that the door to the storage room was slightly ajar. I then saw an eyeball peeking through the crevice. That's when it hit me. The intruder was not in my sister's room. He was here, with me. The terror I felt rushing through my body is something that I will never forget. True, genuine fear. I ran out of the bedroom and booked it down the stairs and out my front door. I then ran up the hill to my neighbor's house, who happened to be a police officer. I told him about the intruder hiding in my bedroom, and he immediately alerted the police. Then he set out to go investigate himself, while I stayed behind with his wife. Minutes later, I ran back down to see if the intruder had been caught. When I entered my house, I saw a tall, skinny man I had never seen before. He had a gray beard and a dirty black coat. He was on the ground, being handcuffed by my neighbor. Ever since that night, I'm no longer allowed to be home alone anymore, and we have upgraded our security around the house now. My family is just happy that I wasn't hurt and are very thankful for my neighbor's bravery. I don't wish an experience like this on anyone, not even my worst enemy. There's always a reason to be afraid.